JT Shaver here with New Layer, and today we're going to take a look at the first foray into lighting from Zhiyun with the FiveRay FR100C RGB tube light and M40 bicolor pocket light. Yeah, you heard me right, I said Zhiyun. One of the most respected gimbal brands has entered a very crowded lighting market, and if you're wondering whether or not these lights might be worth it over some of the alternatives, the fact that I'm doing a dedicated review on these lights might give you a hint. The FiveRay FR100C is a 20-inch RGB tube light with a 13 by 1.5 inch light surface. It's more like a wand or a stick light versus a traditional RGB tube light. Before I get into what sets these lights apart from the rest, first I want to cover the basics. For starters, the carrying cases that come with these lights are among the best that I've ever seen. They're padded, they're semi-rigid, and they're well laid out inside. The branding on the outside of these cases is attractive and unique, so it makes picking these lights out of a big pile of other black generic cases really easy. Inside you'll find the light itself alongside many other accessories like barn doors, diffusion, and a grid. If you buy the combo kit, you'll also get the wall AC adapter, which you'll need to run these lights indefinitely at 100% brightness. It's important to know that no matter what kit you buy, you'll always get the modifiers. The light itself is made of very high quality plastic and is shaped kind of like a rounded box, and it also has a ton of holes for airflow. There's a synthetic faux leather patch on the front of the handle, which makes for a better grip. And on the back, you'll see one of the most unique things about these lights, these 6 integrated fans, which I'll cover a little bit later. I will say the grip on this light is bigger than most other lights, but I'm 6'6", so I really enjoy the extra girth. This is perfect to attach it to light stands or to mini tripods, which could also act like better handles for those of you with tiny baby hands. The branding is very subtle, which makes these look high-end, and these lights come in both a black and white variant. Lastly, the plastic covering the LEDs themselves is a good balance of diffusion while still letting a lot of light through for maximum brightness. You get CCT, HSI, and effects modes on these lights, as well as a CCT Max mode. CCT Max mode doubles the brightness of these lights at the expense of battery life and a little bit of fan noise. There are 14 different special effects to choose from, including flickering light bulb, TV set, fire, and a few more. Although to be honest, like many other tube lights, the effects on these do leave something to be desired, so I don't find it to be a really big selling point. All the settings for every mode are controlled by a single pressable dial on the back of the handle of the light. I really like the dial setup because you don't have to cycle through a million different modes to get to where you want to go. You can just jump into any mode at any time with a single press of the button. The labels next to the dial can be hard to see sometimes depending on the lighting in the room that you're in, but it's so easy to use that it's faster to just press the dial and see what happens rather than bend down and try to look at the labels anyways. Like I said earlier, there are 6 cooling fans on the FR100C, which might sound scary to those of you who have been hurt by fan noise in the past. For starters, the fans don't even come on until you reach a certain brightness and temperature. In my admittedly unscientific testing in my office, which is 72 degrees, the fans on the lights came on after about 2 minutes at 100% brightness. At 50% brightness, they came on after about 10 minutes, and at 25% brightness or less, they just never came on at all. The peak light output in CCT Max mode is 100 watts, which is absolutely insane for this form factor because most other tube lights come in around 15 to 25 watts. As far as the fan noise goes, they aren't silent, but they aren't really that loud either. I had the FR100C sitting on my desk in front of me, and all I could hear was the fans in my PC tower. The only time the fans might become a problem is in CCT Max mode, but if you're blasting these lights at maximum brightness, I think fan noise is at the bottom of your priority list. You can charge these lights via USB-C at 25 watts, but you'll need the AC adapter to charge them at 120 watts for continuous full power use. For battery life, you'll get about 5.5 hours at 10% brightness, 2 hours and 10 minutes at 50% brightness, and about 30 minutes of use at regular 100% brightness. I'll get into the hard numbers for brightness and color accuracy soon, but first I want to show you what I think makes these lights so special, which are the grid, the barn doors, and my favorite, the softbox diffusion. Despite being my least favorite of the 3 modifiers, the grid is very well made, it collapses, and straps on quickly to the lights. The Velcro straps are a bit thin, but they do seem to be made of nice material, so I don't really see them breaking anytime soon. Alternatively, you can use the snap-on barn doors, which are sturdier and offer more flexibility at the expense of a little more light spill. Lastly is the diffusion material, and I think whoever came up with this design deserves a monstrous raise. The diffusion has an elastic band around the outside and is designed to attach directly to the barn doors, which have reflective surfaces inside. Once attached, you spread the barn doors open to act as a frame, and you have yourself a 14 by 5 inch softbox. That's a pretty darn big softbox for a light this small in this form factor. You end up with a really nice soft portable light, which is perfect for things like product shots, and I think makes these lights legitimately an option for a key light. Personally, I really don't consider any other RGB tube lights an option as a key light, simply because they're really small in one dimension. With all the great stuff I've said about these lights, that doesn't mean they're perfect. Some tube lights can stand up vertically on a desk or a flat surface without any help, and some can't. These lights fall into the cannot category, so you'll need a mini tripod, which isn't really a big deal, it's just something you need to know. Another thing that might be a big deal to some people is the lack of remote control, including a mobile app for these lights. Personally, I'd rather have them cut costs by not including a mobile app and including the really useful modifiers like they did here. In my opinion, the modifiers make a much bigger difference in the production quality and usefulness of these lights over a mobile app in most scenarios. The third, final, and probably the biggest downside to these lights is the lack of green-magenta tint control. It's kind of become standard for RGB tube lights to include tint control nowadays, so it's something that I look for in all RGB lights. The saving grace here is that the tint on these lights is not strong at all, so it's really not going to be that big of a deal in most cases. With that said, let's take a look at the actual color accuracy and brightness for these lights. I measured the FR100C with my Sekonic C800 and got the following results. With the light set to 3200 Kelvin, I got an actual CCT of 3267 with a color correction number of 0.2 green. I got a brightness without using CCT max mode of 1150 lux. I measured a CRI of 94.2, TLCI of 97, and SSI of 85. The only metric that is on the lower side is the individual R9 value at 83.6. With the light set to 5500 Kelvin, I got an actual CCT of 5426 with a color correction number of 0.3 magenta, and a brightness without using CCT max mode of 1170 lux. I measured a CRI of 95.3, TLCI of 98, and SSI of 76. Again, the R9 value is a bit on the lower end at 81.9. I know some people might question a total CRI value under 95, but CRI is kind of outdated, and the SSI on these lights is higher than many other lights from Aputure, Godox, and Nanlite. So as a whole, some measurements are slightly worse and some are slightly better, but there's nothing here that would make me hesitate to use them. With the light set to CCT max at 4000 Kelvin, which is the overall most powerful settings, I got a max brightness of 2420 lux. That's versus 1150 lux at regular 100% brightness, so in CCT max mode it's one full stop brighter, and 2 or more full stops brighter than your typical 2-foot RGB tube light. And it's as bright as a 60-watt bicolor COB, which obviously has no RGB capabilities. If you want to see all the brightness and color accuracy measurements I took for this light, I'll have a link in the description to my light comparison tool. It uses real-world measurements instead of manufacturer-provided specs. That way you can more fairly compare lights from different brands. If you couldn't already tell, I'm pretty excited about the FR100C, but what about the other light in the FiveRay lineup, the M40 bicolor pocket light? This pocket light has some unique design choices, but like its tube light sibling, excels massively when it comes to overall brightness. It has a whopping 40 watt output, while most other pocket lights have 5 to 10 watts, with a select few coming in at 20 watts. It's no wonder they made sure to put a 40W in big bold letters on the back of this light, because it's seriously impressive. The M40 is very aesthetically pleasing and is made of high quality plastic both on the body and the knobs. It features a semi-translucent diffusion and a cooling fan of its own, which is around the same volume as the fans on the FR100C. One thing I did notice in testing is that if the fan is running and you accidentally squeeze the light on the back, it kind of pinches onto the body of the fan and makes a squealing noise. It's not a big deal because my tendency is to grab the big black block while I'm adjusting the light, but it did happen a couple times, so I figured I'd mention it. The only metal on this light is the well thought out mounting bracket, which has two 1/4-20 threaded holes so you can mount it vertically or horizontally on a variety of apparatuses. The bracket also makes it easy to set up securely on flat surfaces and folds away when it's not in use. You may have already noticed, but this light has no screen at all, which is something Zhiyun did to cut cost in favor of overall brightness. Again, depending on the light in the room, it can be hard to see the knob sometimes because it's white writing on bright orange background. I think black letters would have been better, but it's really not that big of a deal. This light has a color temperature range of 2700 to 6200 Kelvin with various markings in between. The dimming knob also has markings for 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100% brightness. That's all important to know so you can decide whether or not these lights would fit into your workflow. It might be hard to get perfectly matching settings between multiple lights, or if you have to move the lights around, you can hit the knobs, and it could be hard to get the exact same settings on two different shots. You can charge this light via USB-C, and it has 4 lights on the back to show the battery life, which is just as good as most screens show with a battery level indicator. The battery life on the M40 is pretty similar to the FR100C. At 25% brightness, you'll get about an hour and a half of runtime, and at 100% brightness, you get around 30 minutes. It does support PD fast charging, so if you have a capable charger, you can run this light indefinitely at 100% brightness. The M40 was clearly designed with maximum brightness in mind, but let's take a look at how the color accuracy stacks up. I tested the M40 with my Sekonic C800 and got the following results. With the light set to what appears to be 3200 Kelvin on the dial, I got an actual CCT of 3146 with a color correction number of 0.1 green and a brightness of 1080 lux. I measured a CRI of 94.9, TLCI of 98, and SSI of 86. With the light set to what appears to be 5500 Kelvin on the dial, I got an actual CCT of 5371 with a color correction number of 0.4 magenta and a brightness of 1200 lux. I measured a CRI of 95.8, TLCI of 99, and SSI of 76. The individual R9 values for this light were a bit better at 86.4 and 82.4 when set to 3200 Kelvin and 5500 Kelvin respectively. So again, overall very good numbers, especially when it comes to CCT accuracy, tint, and SSI, which I consider to be the 3 most important metrics. There are other pocket lights out there that are extremely bright, like the Aputure Amaran F7 or the Lupo Smart Panel, but those lights use focusing lenses in front of the LEDs. That might be what you're after, but I only mention it for comparison's sake because these lights reach these brightness levels with no kind of focusing lenses at all. So the M40 manages to be 2.5 to 3 stops brighter than similarly sized pocket lights with no focusing lenses. The FR100C goes for around $150 to $250, depending on the sale price and whether you buy the standard or the combo kit with the AC adapter. Similar lights would be the Godox LC500R for $239, the Nanlite PavoTube 215X at $389, or the Aputure Amaran T2C at $199. Of course, those lights all have their own pros and cons for the price difference. None of those lights, however, can match the brightness of the FR100C and include all 3 of the modifiers that I mentioned earlier, which are the main selling points for me. Zhiyun is also running a very limited buy one get one free offer on both of these lights, so I'll have a link to that in the description. Overall, I do think the FR100C is something special with unique features that set it apart from other lights. And although the M40 has its pros and cons, it's a solid light for the price and has unbelievable brightness. But what do you think? Before you go, leave a comment and let me know what you think about both of these lights. Links are in the description if you want to check these lights out further. That's it for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.